Put that coffee down.
I'm not here to waste your time, okay? I certainly hope you're not here to waste mine. So I'm gonna keep this short.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
Most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
Coffee's for closers only.
Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the Behind Your Back podcast with me, Bradley Hartman, sponsored by Boise Cascade Engineered Wood Products. They help you move faster and build stronger. They make it easier to get more done. And our friends at Materials Exchange. They are the LBM industry's answer to E-Trade. Materials Exchange is your digital marketplace for lumber and panels. On this podcast, we talk about leadership, personal productivity, time management, and the craft of selling in the construction industry, especially in this construction industry during these unprecedented and unique times that we're living in. Amidst all the craziness that we've been living in inside the construction industry, I've been hearing this concept, this phrase has been thrown about more often as a punchline, and it is the Stockdale Paradox. I've been hearing more and more people reference the Stockdale Paradox from the book Good to Great. And Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, describes the Stockdale Paradox as stoically accepting the brutal facts of reality while maintaining unwavering faith in the endgame and a commitment to prevail despite the brutal facts. So what are these brutal facts that we're talking about? Well, depending on who you talk to and what sector of the construction industry and at what time of day, they could be referring to the labor shortage, material shortage, some pricing absurdities that are going on with $88 sheets of OSB, the pandemic, not to mention Russian hacking, the GameStop saga, and non-fungible tokens, which I still don't understand. So over the past several months, I've heard several people refer to this Stockdale Paradox as a concept, and they've thrown it out as a punchline without much context. And I believe that understanding the man and the man who influenced him is definitely worth your time and attention. So in addition to the Stockdale Paradox from Good to Great, Admiral James Stockdale is also known for his somewhat disappointing performance at the 1992 vice presidential debate against Dan Quayle and Al Gore. In this regard, Stockdale is held up as an example of what not to do.
Who am I? Why am I here? I'm not a politician, everybody knows that, so don't expect me to use the language of the Washington Insider. 37 years in the Navy, and only one of them up there in Washington. And now I'm an academic. The centerpiece of my life was the Vietnam War. I was there the day it started. I led the first bombing raid against North Vietnam. I was there the day it ended, and I was there for everything in between.
Yes, Admiral James Stockdale is held up as what not to do in a national debate. Number one, don't start off your speech by acting very confused about who you are and how you got there. Number two, do not tie yourself directly to the biggest international debacle in American affairs in history. And number three, do not refer to yourself as an academic. There's such a small percentage of the population that admires people who call themselves academics. Needless to say, his performance at the 1992 vice presidential debate hardly encapsulates the man and his message and his leadership principles. I would strongly encourage everyone to read Courage Under Fire, a book that Admiral James Stockdale wrote. In it, he shared his leadership philosophy, and he said that no matter the carrier that he was on, no matter how often he was flying daily combat missions, he never went anywhere with one book. It's called the Enchiridion. And at the core of the Enchiridion is really this idea of subjective consciousness, which sounds, well, a little aggressive and a little bit academic. Subjective consciousness. What does this really mean? Well, it really means that your consciousness, the way you think, is really subjective. That is, you can control it. It's not automated. It's not mandatory. You get to choose your own consciousness. Admiral James Stockdale embraced the idea that you can distinguish what is in and without your own power. What are things that are outside of your power? Well, it's your environment, your health, your wealth, your reputation, any sort of social prestige, power, lives of loved ones, and death itself. Now that list is just scratching the surface. What are the elements that are things that are within your control? Well, it's your own thinking, it's your own intentionality, it's your desires, and most importantly, it's your emotions. In the early pages of Courage Under Fire, Admiral James Stockdale writes, quoting the Enchiridion, "Remember, you are an actor in a drama of such sort as the author chooses. If short, then it's a short one. If long, then in a long one. If it be his pleasure that you should enact a poor man, or a cripple, or a ruler, see that you act it well. For this is your business, to act well the given part, but to choose it, that belongs to another." Stockdale recognized that you are not the director in the play that is your life. You are an actor. And what were the roles that Stockdale played? Well, he started as a pilot, a patriot, a soldier, and a husband. And very quickly, he became a prisoner of war and a criminal. Stockdale was shot down over North Vietnam and ejected from his plane. And he writes, "After ejection, I had about 30 seconds to make my last statement in freedom before I landed in the main street of a little village right ahead. And so help me," I whispered to myself, 5 years down there, at least. I'm leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus." Who is Epictetus? Well, he's the author of the Enchiridion, and he has been training Stockdale for everything in his life that was about to come. Roughly 50 years after the death of Jesus Christ, Epictetus set up a school where he trained people, quote, "how to think and act if your child dies, or if your brother dies, or if you must die, or be tortured." Following the teachings of Epictetus and following the guide that is the Enchiridion, Stockdale treated life as a laboratory. He wanted to test things out. He wanted to see what worked, and he wanted to see what didn't. He wanted to see what broke. And as Stockdale floated down into the small village in North Vietnam, he was going to be able to test numerous hypotheses about human nature and how human beings act. He wrote, "Remember what the Stoics say. Work with what you have control of, and you'll have your hands full. What is not up to you? What is beyond your power? What is not subject to your will in the last analysis? For starters, let's take your station in life. As I glide down toward that little town on my short parachute ride, I'm just about to learn how negligible is my control over my station in life. It's not at all up to me. I'm going right now from being the leader of 100+ pilots and 1,000 men, and goodness knows all sorts of symbolic status and goodwill, to being an object of contempt. I'll be known as a criminal, but that's not the half of the revelation that is the realization of your own fragility. That you can be reduced by wind and rain and ice and seawater or men to a helpless, sobbing wreck, unable to control even your bowels in a matter of minutes. And more than that even, you're going to face fragilities you never before let yourself believe you could have. Like after a mere minutes in a flurry of action while being bound with tourniquet-tight ropes with care by a professional, hands behind, jackknife forward, and down toward your ankles held secure in lugs, attached to an iron bar that with the onrush of anxiety, knowing your upper body's circulation has been stopped, and feeling the ever-growing induced pain and the ever-closing in of claustrophobia, you can be made to blurt out answers, sometimes correct answers, to questions about anything they know you know. And hereafter, I'll just call that situation taking the ropes. Admiral James Stockdale was a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. He was there for 8 years, and he was tortured over 20 times. Citing the Enchiridion, Stockdale often talked about the simple analogy of a cup breaking. Here's the quote from the Enchiridion. "As when our neighbor's boy has broken a cup, or the like, we are ready at once to say, well, these are casualties that will happen. Be assured then that when your own cup is likewise broken, you ought to be affected just as when another's cup was broken. Now, apply this to greater things. Is the child or wife of another dead? There is no one who would say, this is an accident of mortality. But if anyone's own child happens to die, it is immediately, alas, how wretched am I. It should be always remembered how we are affected on hearing the same thing concerning others." And that's a tough analogy to think through, especially if you've been through the death of a loved one or you've been through cancer. This idea that, yeah, things are going to break. And that's easy to say when they're things, or they're mugs, or they're anything else on the job site. It's different when it's people. And what the Enchiridion and Stockdale would challenge you to say is it? You know these things are going to happen. Casualties will happen, large or small. And you can imagine this idea, this concept of taking control of your own emotions would be put to the test in a POW camp. In Courage Under Fire, Stockdale wrote, but add this requirement of total personal responsibility for each and every one of your emotions. And you're talking about a person with his hands full. I whispered a chant to myself as I was marched at gunpoint to my daily interrogation. Control fear, control guilt. Control fear, control guilt. Like Epictetus, Stockdale knew firsthand that fear and guilt, they led to shame. And they said more than pain, shame is what breaks you. In the Vietnamese prison camp for over 8 years, Admiral Stockdale took it as his personal responsibility to help the entire group, 100+ men, maintain the correct mindset to survive. He said inevitably he would meet a new prisoner and he would hear something like this: "You don't want to talk to me. I'm a traitor." And because we were equally fragile, it seemed to catch on that we all replied something like this: "Listen, pal, there are no virgins here. You should have heard the kind of statement I made. Snap out of it. We're all in this together. What's your name? Tell me about yourself." To hear that last was, for most new prisoners just out of initial shakedown and a cold soak, a turning point in their lives. Now let's take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. With customers in mind, Boise Cascade makes work faster, stronger, and easier. How? Let's talk about faster. Boise Cascade Engineered Wood Products has nationwide distribution. Boise Cascade is always close to you with the right products, on-time delivery, and local support. Boise Cascade also offers BC Connect. It's your engineered wood profit center. Their free suite of software tools for EWP dealers ensures seamless communication and collaboration between sales professionals, designers, and operations managers to keep your projects moving forward. And as we've discussed in previous episodes on this show, they also have their SawTech technology. Optimize, cut, repeat. The SawTech automated processing allows Boise Cascade dealers to cut 4 times more BCI joists compared to manual cutting. Boise Cascade's preventive maintenance program, spare part inventory, and real-time monitoring keep your business running. Faster, stronger, easier. It's not just what Boise Cascade does, it's who they are. After 4 years of torture, it was hard for anyone, including Stockdale, to keep his emotions under control. He writes, "Then I got back into trouble. At that time, the commissar of prisons had had me isolated under almost constant surveillance for the year since I had staged a riot to get us out of leg irons. I was barred from all prisoner cell blocks, I had special handlers, and they caught me with an outbound note that gave leads I knew the interrogators could develop through torture. The result would be to implicate my friends in black activities. I'd been through those ropes more than a dozen times, and I knew I could contain material so long as they didn't know I knew it. But this note, it would open doors that could lead to more people getting killed in there. It was the fall of 1969, and I had been in this role for 4 years, and I saw nothing left for me to do but check out. I was solo in the main torture room in an isolated part of the prison. My chair was near the only pane glass window in the prison. I was able to waddle over and break the window stealthily. I went after my wrist arteries with the big shards. I had knocked the light out, but the patrol guard happened to find me passed out in a pool of blood, but still breathing. The Vietnamese sounded the alert, got their doctor, and saved me. Why? It wasn't until I was released years later that I learned that that very week, Sybil, his wife, had been in Paris demanding humane treatment for prisoners. She was on world news, a public figure, and the last thing the North Vietnamese needed was me dead. There had been a very solemn crowd of senior North Vietnamese officers in that room when I was revived. Prison torture, as we had known it in Hanoi, ended for everybody that night. It's hard to read that passage from Courage Under Fire by Stockdale and not feel your own control of your own emotions slipping just a little bit. 4 years after his attempted suicide, Stockdale was released and returned home, and he credited the Enchiridion by Epictetus as the primary tool that helped him survive. Written over 2,000 years ago, you might be wondering, yeah, that's fine. How is the Enchiridion, written by Epictetus, how is that relevant today? This simple sentence comes to mind. If you ever happen to turn your attention to externals for the pleasure of anyone, be assured that you have ruined your scheme of life. Let me read that again. If you ever happen to turn your attention to externals for the pleasure of anyone, be assured that you have ruined your scheme of life. And right now, when we deal with social media as a tool to help us communicate during very tough times, yeah, it's been helpful. It's helped us maintain contact with people we love and important elements that we need to be apprised of throughout the pandemic. And yet, if there's ever been a tool to help you turn your attention to externals for the pleasure of yourself, this is it. And as he writes, this can ruin your scheme of life. Admiral James Stockdale passed away in 2005 before any of the social media truly exploded. You can imagine what he would say about us really striving for likes and continuously checking our phone to see how people are responding to what we've posted, present company included. In Courage Under Fire, he wrote, "It's really hard to discuss in public the real-life challenges of that laboratory in Vietnam because people always ask the wrong questions. How was the food? That's the first one. It's always the first one. And in a place like I've been, that's so far down the scale that you want to cry. Did they harm you physically? What was the nature of the device they used to harm you? Always the device or the truth serum or the electric shock treatment, all of which would totally defeat the purpose of a person seriously trying to break down your will. All of those things would give you a feeling of moral superiority, which is the last thing you'd want to have happen. I'm not talking about brainwashing. There's no such thing. I'm talking about having looked over the brink and seen the bottom of the pit and realized the truth of that linchpin of Stoic thought, that the things that bring down a man is not pain, but shame." You can imagine both sides of that conversation. Someone who survived 8 years of torture in a camp away from his family and his friends and everything in his life that gave him purpose. And you come out, and what do people want to know? How was the food? What was the torture like? What Stockdale really wanted to talk about, the most important questions, were about how you manage your mindset to survive that, intact and be stronger for it. And for Stockdale, the top 4 questions might have been, what's within your control? What's outside of your control? What's the right thing to do? How do I play this part well? And here's that exact passage from the Enchiridion. And if it sounds Shakespearean, well, Shakespeare got it from somewhere. Remember that you are an actor in a drama of such sort as the author chooses. If short, then it's a short one. If long, then it's a long one. If it be his pleasure that you should enact a poor man, or a cripple, or a ruler, or a private citizen, see that you act it well. For this is your business, to act well the given part, but to choose it belongs to another. You are not in control of the role that you play. You just got to play it well. James Cagney, the famous American actor, had a great quote that ties in directly to this. He said, "Playing a part well isn't that hard. Know your lines, show up on time, hit your mark, and tell the truth." And while the opening lines of Admiral James Stockdale 1992 vice presidential debate are often referred to as what not to do, I think we should all spend some time thinking about what he said after that.
I know things about the Vietnam War better than anybody in the world. I know some things about the Vietnam War better than anybody in the world. And I know how governments, how American governments can be courageous and how they can be callow. And that's important. That's one thing I'm an insider on. I was the leader of the underground of the American pilots who were shot down in prison in North Vietnam. You should know that the American character displayed in those dungeons by those fine men was the thing of beauty. I look back on those years as the beginning of wisdom, learning everything a man can learn about the vulnerabilities and the strengths that are ours as Americans. Why am I here tonight? I am here because I have in my brain and in my heart what it takes to lead America through tough times.
Thank you, Admiral.
Stockdale can teach us a lot, far more than a punchline about the Stockdale Paradox from good to great and what not to do in a debate. He can teach you how to live during tough times. And we're always living in tough times. There's always something that we're going through. We're all fighting our own battles. All we can do is control what you can control. So you may be wondering, all right, there's a pair of book recommendations that we've been referring to. Courage Under Fire by Admiral James Stockdale and The Enchiridion by Epictetus. How long are these books, you might be wondering? Like, how much of a time investment do I need to make to get something out of them? Well, you might be surprised. Courage Under Fire is currently selling for $4.99 on Amazon. It's 21 pages long. The Enchiridion by Epictetus is 24 pages long, and it's $1.99. For under $7 and for 45 pages, you can learn not only from Stockdale, but the person that Stockdale learned from, Epictetus. Simply 45 pages that you'll want to reread on how to live through tough times. As you can tell, I've learned a lot from it. I think you can too. So despite all the craziness that we're living under with the labor shortage and the material shortage and pricing absurdity and the pandemic and not to mention non-fungible tokens, yeah, we would be wise to revisit these 45 pages. And remember, Stockdale, that we can accept the brutal facts of reality and yet maintain unwavering faith in the end game and a commitment to prevail despite the brutal facts. As always, thank you for listening. I hope you found this worth your time and attention. Thank you to Boise Cascade Engineered Wood Products and their innovative SawTech technology. You can learn more by visiting bc.com/EWP. And what E-Trade is for the stock market, Materials Exchange is to the LBM industry. They make commodity pricing transparent, buying simple, and the fees are low. Register today and use the promo code BRADLEY, BRADLEY, to get your first trade free. We're going to close out like we always do. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first.